Okay, good morning, 8th grade English. We're going to have a review for quiz 1 for the first thing this morning. So please get your 809 and turn to page 17 and we're going to go over the checklist. So everyone get page 17 of book 809. Alrighty, raise your hand through there. Okay, still waiting on a couple of you. Let's see. Alright, okay, so we're ready to go. Alright, first thing, do you know how to correctly use commas in the sentence? So let's page back to page 2 in this book and just take a quick look at that. Right, page 2, right in the We Remember section, and you want to be right there on number 16. 16 and 17 say, place commas where they are needed in the sentence. They give you 2 examples, and you need to know both of these for your quiz. And so the first example has to do with transitional words. So when you have a compound sentence that is divided by a semicolon and then has a transitional word, the comma needs to come after the transitional word. So this example here is weather influences our lives every day, semicolon, for example, comma. It affects the clothing we wear and the outdoor activities we do. So that's the first place where you learned to do commas. The next one has to do with these introductory adverb phrases. Number 17, on page 2, before modern technology, comma. People observe the sky, planets, and animals for clues to the weather. Make sure you know that. Okay, let's flip back to that review section again on page 17. Next one, can you replace weak verbs and verb-adverb combinations with more vivid verbs? Let's go to page 7 in this book, and you have a review on that. Now, if you remember, you needed to write a paragraph about this and put vivid verbs in. Some of you did very well in that part, and we talked about it that a good number of you struggled with using descriptive words, adjectives, and even good adverbs instead of these vivid verbs. So remember, we are putting verbs in, and they're verbs that are action verbs. So make sure that you're using action verbs and not just a descriptive adjective or a good adverb that often ends in ly. So you have the example on page 7 of this light unit, number 9. During the storm, powerful waves violently hit the coastal areas. So you need to put a word in there for violently hit. Now, I don't know what you put in there, but I think I would put in pounded. During the storm, powerful waves pounded the coastal areas. So, you have all kinds of choices, and those verbs, they don't really need modifiers often because they're so good and they say what you want to say. So, for example, if you're walking really slowly and you're tired, you might use a word like trudged. Or if you're talking about a car that a young man is taking at a high speed, you may say he zoomed past, or raced past, or ripped past. Vivid verbs. You'll have some of those on your quiz. Next one. Back on page 17, on the checklist. Can you identify infinitives and infinitive phrases that function as nouns? Okay, well, you have that. If you go to lesson 1 of this book, we have all about infinitives. Okay, so you remember infinitives are one of the 3 kinds of verbals. They are the easiest to identify. Why? Well, because they begin with that little telltale word, to. And so infinitives always begin with the word to, followed by a verb, usually an action kind of verb. Can be a verb being, but usually action. So you learned all about that in review. You've had this before this year in lesson 1. So do you know how to identify if they are nouns? Well, if you go back to lesson 1, just to quickly review, we learned that if they're being used as nouns, they can be subjects. Top of page 1. Are you all there? Okay. If they're being used as nouns, they can be subjects. They could be predicate nominatives. They can be direct objects, objects of prepositions, or a positive. The 5 ways you can use nouns. Infinitives used as nouns will be all of those. Okay? And so you simply look for that to with the verb and then identify what part is it doing in the sentence. So they give the example, to spread the gospel was Jesus' last command. What was Jesus' last command? What is the subject of the sentence? To spread the gospel. So there it's being used as a subject. Now, we don't need to go back to the checklist because the next thing they're going to ask you, do you know, when they're used as adjectives. So, what are they like when they're used as adjectives? So, and this is the tricky part of infinitives. So, participles are always being used as adjectives, gerunds always as nouns, but infinitives, now they all have their good point, you know, because infinitives are so easy to find, but they're trickier because they could be nouns, they could be adjectives, and they could be adverbs. Isn't that complicated? Well, welcome to English, but you know it, so great. All right, what do they look like when they're used as adjectives? So that's kind of the next part right here, back on page 1. And we're simply learning, again in review, you've had this earlier this year, that when they're used as an adjective, they're going to follow a noun, and they're going to describe that noun. So it doesn't need to be difficult. Just look at it carefully. Hurry, it's time to leave for church. Which time? To leave for church. And so you have it used as an adjective. Drop down to the bottom of the page, still on page 1. 809, and we have infinitives being used as adverbs. And the rest of the lesson is about that, and then the next lesson, if you remember, was about diagram of goes. So, one of the ways you can figure out if they're adverbs is simply by elimination. It's not a noun, it's not an adjective, then it's an adverb. So you found an infinitive, you said it's not noun, it's not adjective, it's going to be an adverb. Typically, we're taught here that adverbs will answer the questions why or to what extent. All right. Now let's remember, if they're functioning as adverbs, they can do things adverbs do. Adverbs mostly modify verbs, thank you, but they can also modify what else? Adjectives, yes, and adverbs, other adverbs. So they're pretty versatile little creatures, aren't they? They can do lots of things. All right, so here we have examples of infinitives modifying verbs. We hurried. Where? Modifying a verb. To meet grandfather's plane. Modifying adjectives. Sonia and Anita were excited to see their cousins. Why? Answers the question why were they excited. And then when it modifies another adverb, it's typically going to modify that adverb of extent. Remember those adverbs that tell us degrees. So words like very and so. And here we have an example. I am too tired to think clearly. How tired are you? What level of tired? Too tired. You have that adverb of extent. To think clearly is going to go back and modify that adverb of extent. Okay, let's flip back over to page 17 and see what else you need to review. Okay, so we did all the infinitives. Check, 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 check. You're down to dashes. Well, that was from the last book, but you did have some review on that back on page 3 in this book. So go to page 3. And numbers 28, 29, and 30 on page 3 in 809, the one you have in your hand, we have a review on dashes. And yes, you're going to have dashes on the quiz. So pay some attention to this. Remember, dashes can be used for interrupting thought in the sentence, not in the same way that commas are used, but just with more emphasis. You use a dash. So number 28, they're also used following a list. Remember we said kind of opposite of a colon. So a colon is when you introduce a list, colon, and then you finish the list. But when you have the list first, and then you have the explanation, you use a dash. So that's what we have on number 28 of page 3. Rain, freezing rain, sleet, hail, snow. These are all forms of precipitation. And so we have the dash after the list. Okay? Now on number 29 we have that interrupting thought. Twice a day, at midnight and noon, Greenwich Mean Time, it is the worldwide standard time. So you have that interrupting explanation. And so the dash would be right after time and right between time and hundreds in that case. Okay, so you will have some dashes on your quiz, so study that again. All right, back to the review checklist. And we have next, can you choose the correct pronoun to complete an elliptical clause? And we've gone over this a lot. So I think you know how to do this. Remember that elliptical clause. What is it? Someone tell us, what's an elliptical clause? Okay, yeah, so it's that clause that you don't put in all the words because they're just understood. And then sometimes when you need to use a pronoun following or in that clause, it can be tricky. So let's go back to page 7 of this light unit, and you have some review on that. Okay, so down numbers 22, 23, and 24 of page 7, in the light unit you're holding in your hand, you have some practice in this. So number 22, young children often look up to and admire those who are a few years older than them or they. Now, you already did this, so hopefully you did it right. And what did you choose? You should have had they circled. And then we learned how to kind of finish the clause. And so the way you should have finished this clause, you should have written in that blank, older than they are. So to say the whole sentence over, in its complete form, we would say, young children often look up to and admire those who are a few years older than they are. And so what you should have put in your blank, again, is this. Okay, so can you see that on the board? Hopefully you can. Blow it up a little bit if you're struggling, but I think you can. Okay, so, yeah, you know how to do that, don't you? Okay, let's go back. And lastly, we have, can you diagram sentences containing noun clauses, infinitive phrases used as nouns, and adverb clauses modifying other adverbs. And you have had some examples of this, but we'll just quickly go over it. If you go back to page 14, you have an example of the last one there, adverbs modifying other adverbs. So go back to page 14 in your the book you're holding, and look at number 13. So number 13, you have the example, and it looks something like this. And so you had a predicate, well, what is it, nominative or adjective? So, but hurricane also are less forceful. And so there's a predicate adjective here, and then you had an adverb modifying it, and then you have an adverb clause below. And so you're going to put the subordinated conjunction right here. But you have an adverb and then an adverb clause modifying the adverb. So that's how you do that. Go back to page 17. So what do you do with noun clauses? Remember, noun clauses can be used for any way you can use a noun. But just as an example, if you're using them as the subject of the sentence, you would go like this. If you're using them as a direct object, you would go like this. If you're using them as an object of preposition, you would go like this. What else? A positive. So let's say you had the subject here, and then you had a positive. And then you would go do it that way. So that's noun clauses. You knew that, didn't you? Okay. So the other one would be infinitive phrases used as nouns. So just to leave our diagram, yeah, it's getting nasty here. So let's start over. By the way, I'm enjoying this chalkboard. So I'm downstairs in the extra classroom, and I'm glad to have chalk in my hand again. You know, those whiteboards, I don't know, they're supposed to be great, but can't beat plain old chalk. So it's good to have chalk in my hand. Alrighty. Oh, infinitive phrases used as nouns. That would be our last one. And so we know that can be a subject, and you simply do them like this. You put the little rocking chair up there, put the word to up here, and then of course they can have complements, so you could have a direct object back here, or could possibly have predicate adjectives and non-verbs, not very often, usually direct objects. And of course they can have other modifiers. Okay, so they could be a predicate, a direct object, so you could have that. You could even have them as an object of preposition, so you would have this. But anyway, you build the rocking chair and put the word to up there. Alrighty, so any questions? Ready for the quiz? Alright, so tell your mom or dad, go get the quiz, do your best, ask the Lord to help you, and when you get it handed in, I'll get it graded. So thank you very much.